Today is September 11th, 2010. Good evening. I'm Eric Hackley, and this is Hackonomics. Tonight we're going to discuss my most favorite subject of all the subjects that we've discussed. Tonight we're going to talk about genealogy and why this Allen County Public Library genealogy department is so great. That's what everybody says, and you know, I've always wanted to find out what is it that these guys are doing that has distinguished this department from all the other ones in the country. To help me put light on that is the Genealogy Department Director, Curt. Curt, welcome to the show here.
Thanks, Eric. Glad to be here.
You know, everybody around Fort Wayne knows about this department, and they kind of know about Salt Lake City too. Right. So they must, people who push genealogy must have those two together. But you know, what I really want to start out with is, you know, what exactly is genealogy, and how is it similar, and how is it different from history?
Those are great questions. Genealogy, most simply defined, is just the pursuit of one's own family history. Now, there are most of our customers, most of our patrons do genealogy for themselves. So you would go in and research your family. I would go in and research my family. A few of them do research for others, other family members, or they do it as part of a business. But genealogy, most simply and most basically, is just tracing the history of your family. Even though it sounds like a pretty basic concept, it really can be a very engaging, very exciting activity as you try to put your family in the context of the neighborhood you grew up, the city you grew up, the state where you grew up. It's really one of the neatest ways to teach history, which is a great lead-in to your second question. How does family history and genealogy differ from regular history? I would say that genealogy is a part of general history. There are many who would disagree with me, Eric, but I believe that history can best be taught, and I would argue can only be taught, if we research and explore the lives of the people in the area that we're trying to research, in the time period we're trying to research. How can you research, for example, a war without researching who was in that war? Where did they come from? Why did they join? Were they forced? Did they volunteer? How long did they serve? What did they do after the war? And all those are pieces of one's family history. So I think it's really hard to dissect family history and remove it from history and say, okay, this is history over here and this is family history. I fear one of the reasons that our young people don't like history in schools is because it's what I call broad brush history. It's very general, and we memorize famous, rich, or infamous landed individuals, as opposed to taking a look at where history has lived. And that's right where you and I live, in our neighborhoods, in our towns, on our streets. So kids get very disinterested in memorizing dates and places and generals and wars. You get kids engaged almost immediately if you talk about family. Hey, what was your family doing during the Depression? Hey, what was your family life like when you were a child? Where did you go to school? Who was in that school? Who did you see? Who didn't you see in school?
Well, you know, I didn't really get hooked on genealogy until I started reading about American history. And then I ran the Hackleys during history, and especially in Fort Wayne history. And so as I started finding facts out about my family and then finding records about my family, the two went hand in hand.
Absolutely.
But I'm not here to talk about me. You know, what role did Alex Haley have in this whole movement of stimulating interest in this field? I mean, was this field always this popular before Alex Haley and Roots came on the scene?
Popularity in genealogy has ebbed and waned over the years. Some decades very popular, some decades not so popular. But Alex Haley, what he did, his research and the turning of his research into a book and then into a movie, I mean, the most important thing that he did, I believe, was that he showed that anybody, or maybe we should say everybody, can do family history. The fact that his work came out around the nation's bicentennial in 1976 was a big plus as well, because every time there's a major event like the turning of a millennia, a centennial, a bicentennial, people's interest in history is nudged up a little bit. But he did something that no one else had really done in a large, remarkable way, and that's to say, You know, ordinary people do extraordinary things. Ordinary people have extraordinary lives. And even ordinary people living ordinary lives as a whole, it's quite extraordinary. And he showed that anyone can do family history. You don't have to have money, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be famous, you don't have to be European American, which was sort of a myth that, well, African Americans, well, it's going to be really tough. And it is challenging to do African American family history, but it's not impossible. You shouldn't put that barrier up saying, oh gosh, Eric, I don't know, you might want to be careful before you start your family history because it's going to be really difficult. He showed, no, that's not true. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a history. And it was phenomenal what he did. And it cut across all races and all socioeconomic classes. It's like, wow, look at this guy, this extraordinary story he told, the wonderful documents he collected. Hey, maybe I can do that for my family. So people from all over the country really caught that excitement that I can probably do this too. I don't have to be rich or famous or belong to a particular social class to do family history. It sort of really evened the playing field, if you will. It kind of let everyone have the expectation that they can find documents and that they can find their history. It was extraordinary, and we're still living through the benefit of that.
Well, you know, about a year ago now, when you had when you hosted the first African American Genealogical Summit that was held here at the Allen County Public Library, I had a chance to talk with people, you know, from all across the country about how they got involved in genealogy. And if that clip is ready to go, the first one, I'm going to go ahead and run that because this guy, when I first met him, he, nice looking guy, but he didn't seem, you can't look at a person and know what goes on in their minds. Right. Because his voice wasn't even like I thought his voice would be. But if that clip is ready to go, let's go ahead and run that, and we'll come back here and talk some more with the department head of genealogy. And how did you get involved with genealogy? And did you ever know anything about Fort Wayne before? Is this your first time coming to Fort Wayne?
This is my first time coming to Fort Wayne. It's a very hospitable and friendly town. I'm really impressed with the way your library is set up with everything on one floor, all the resources that one would need to do research, and it's a pleasure to be here.
You know, is that what makes it special? Because I haven't been to a lot of other libraries to do any research like this.
Any of the other places that I've been, and I've been to the one in North Carolina, D.C., all of the governmental places in D.C. doing research, down in Virginia, Portsmouth, Virginia, Southampton County, Virginia. You do have to move around a lot when you go to those places because their resources are in different locations. At the library here, everything is on the same floor. You simply have to move across the room to verify a resource. I think it's a marvelous way you have that set up.
How long have you been interested in genealogy?
About 20 years now. I used to listen to the stories that my grandmother told about her childhood, and when I got older, I wanted to know something about the names of the people that she talked about, the places that she talked about. And so I started to go back to the courthouses, to the areas where I played as a baby in my great-grandmother's yard. I didn't know then that where she lived was actually the old Indian reservation. Okay, I did not know that, but she was the last living resident on that reservation. So I was interested in knowing the facts about that existence, okay? So that's why I got interested, and that's how I got started.
Pretty much typical as to how a person gets started, just through a sincere interest in a member of their family?
It is, Eric, one of the typical scenarios. I sometimes shy away from calling one particular thing typical. His scenario is one that's repeated by thousands of people. They've heard stories from their aunts and uncles, from grandparents, from their actual parents, sometimes even older brothers and sisters where there's a large birth gap between siblings in a family. Sometimes people come to genealogy because they were assigned to it in school, and they kind of grudgingly start down this path, and then they start to find things. They start to find their family on a census record, in a document, living on a street as evidenced in the city directory. All kinds of ways of sparking family history. But probably one of the more important ways, I believe, are the stories that our families tell. You hear so many people gather for a family reunion, and they start talking about the good old days when they were younger, where they used to live, what they used to do. And oftentimes that will spur, a thought in someone's mind, hey, maybe I should go back and see if I can find some old photographs. And they start looking around their photo albums or their family documents, and they start piecing information together. So family in one way or another is pretty key in both starting genealogy and sparking that interest, but also in continuing doing family history.